fact-checked. Welcome, Frederico.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you for having me on.
So Meta says it will adjust its content review policies on Facebook and Instagram, removing fact checkers and replacing them with user-generated community notes. So US President-elect Donald Trump and his allies have criticized Meta for its fact-checking policy, calling it censorship of right-wing voices. The company has more than 3 billion users globally. Frederico, how effective do you think community notes will be compared to professional fact-checkers in combating misinformation?
Well, I think we first of all have to point out that this applies to the US at the moment only. So all its third-party fact-checking partners will be phased out over the next 6 months by Meta in the US. In terms of the actual effectiveness, community notes, for instance, I mean that's an open question. X, formerly Twitter, introduced community notes, and now Meta is doing the same, where users in fact check each other, but with the X example, for instance, there is no access for communications researchers, social media researchers, to see if actually community notes are effective in countering the spread of falsehoods and conspiracy theories and all sorts of nonsensical information on the platform. Because Elon Musk, since taking over, has denied researchers access to the data sets that they previously had to be able to monitor the effectiveness of such interventions. And that's basically what's happening now with Meta as well. Since Meta shut down CrowdTangle, which was a tool used by researchers to monitor what was happening on the Meta platforms, Meta shut that down last year, the CrowdTangle tool. It's become hard to actually say or to measure, the effectiveness of interventions on the platform. So researchers don't have access. Now, what we can say about community notes is that, community notes, just from what we see, community notes are problematic in themselves because, I've seen examples of community notes on X where the people coming in and trying to correct information actually produce more misleading information or post more misleading information or post information from sources which aren't all that credible, to try and maybe correct or introduce more accurate information to a post. So community notes can be problematic, and it's certainly not as effective as journalists and professional fact checkers trying to establish the accuracy of information and posting accurate information to posts.
Yes. Then could relying on user-generated content moderation increase the risk of misinformation spreading on these platforms, Frederico?
Look, I mean, it's definitely going to happen. I mean, that's what's already what fact checkers are already pointing out in the US, and researchers in the US already pointing out. It's just going to exacerbate, make it worse. The pollution of social media platforms with all sorts of mis and disinformation and conspiracy theories and the like, in the name of free expression, as it's being couched. So basically the narrative that fact checkers are part of a censorship machine. This false narrative that fact-checking is part of a censorship machine. This narrative has now triumphed, and fact-checking is seen as censorship, which is totally false. It's a narrative that has been pushed by certain political actors in the US primarily, and picked up by other actors around the world that have certain agendas that they feel just because people point out that they're spreading falsehoods, their freedom of expression is being denied, is being undermined, they are being censored, which fact checkers aren't censoring anybody. Fact checkers are simply pointing out, this person said this, but this is actually what the accurate information is. And of course, these people who spread these things are saying, yeah, they should be allowed to lie, and they should be allowed to push narratives that aren't accurate. And what's happened is this fact-checking is censorship narrative has triumphed with this move, basically. So I mean, it's highly disturbing. It's problematic, and I mean, this has been pointed out by researchers and journalists and fact checkers in the US already over the last day. There's a whole raft of articles around this that have come out where they make this case, and say that this will I think will further cast social media as a space for deviant communication and information. And social media is already problematic, not just in the US, but everywhere. So, I mean, it's just going to exacerbate that. And I don't think the platforms are doing themselves any, a favor by doing this. X certainly hasn't done itself it hasn't benefited X. X has become a completely polluted social media space. And the same is going to happen to Facebook, to Meta. I mean, I think they think it's going to enhance, them. But in the long run, you could just see how this is going to become problematic for these companies as well. Because if people start, feeling that social media spaces are just spaces where they're being lied to, where they're being misled, where all sorts of questionable information is being spread, where malinformation and misinformation are the order of the day, then already people don't trust. If you look at sort of data on this, already people don't trust a lot of the information they're seeing on social media and posters on social media. They feel other people on social media are lying to them. And already that sort of sentiment is increasing if you look at the research. That's just going to increase, and I don't see how these platforms think this is going to do them any good over the long term.
Yeah. Then who will be held accountable if false information spreads widely under this new system?
Well, I mean, the platforms then have to take responsibility for this. I mean, totally removing any sort of guardrails that were there to assist their users in terms of ensuring that credible, accurate information, verified information, spreads via their platforms. Now, removing those guardrails, and now these spaces are flooded with all sorts of nonsense. They'd have to take responsibility for this. But they're saying free expression. People can say whatever they like. It's up to people what they believe and so on. But we're already seeing. I mean, these sorts of this attitude is problematic, especially when it comes to younger users of these platforms, and younger users and female users, young female users, who are especially adversely affected by what's happening on social media platforms. And that's why some countries are looking to introduce age limits to who can access and use social media platforms. So I mean, once again, I come back to the point about how do these platforms think, these companies think this is good for them, removing these guardrails, when all the research points to what they're doing is highly problematic.
Yeah.
And they're going to be held accountable at some point for this.
Yes.
Make no mistake about that.
Then, Frederico, how will this policy change affect regions where misinformation has historically had severe, political consequences?
Yeah, I mean, so we expect, this move to eventually be rolled out worldwide. This is what fact checkers now, are saying, and I'm part of the Africa Facts Network of African fact checkers, and already, in our discussions, online discussions, this is being pointed out. African fact checkers, especially those who have been in this third-party partnership, fact-checking partnership with Meta, have to now prepare themselves for eventually what's happening now in the US to be rolled out worldwide. And this goes for fact-checking these third-party fact-checkers around the world where Meta has struck up these partnerships. But look, I mean, Meta has been telegraphing this for a while now. I mean, at the Africa Fact Summit in October last year, this was a big discussion point because, I mean, Zuckerberg and Meta have been sort of telegraphing this move for a while, that they're going to end their third-party fact-checking program. And so, they were, and it was highly contentious at the Africa Fact Summit, where, some people were saying, this is probably not going to happen, and others were saying, this is imminent, this is going to happen. So it was something we could see coming, and now it's happened. And I think a lot of people in the fact-checking community worldwide have been caught off guard by this. These were some of the things I was sort of picking up on at the summit, which was held in Ghana in October last year, where already there was sort of talk of this happening. So, I mean, it will have an effect. It will have an effect on the effectiveness of fact checkers and fact checking, and how effective the impactfulness of fact checking on social media platforms, certainly. So, I mean, I think we'll see what happens in the US, and then in other parts of the world where fact checking is just sort of gaining traction. It could derail the impact of fact checking quite considerably.
Yes. Frederico, just the last question before I let you go. How can Meta prevent bad actors or coordinated groups from manipulating the community notes system?
Well, I mean, that's an open question. How do you do that? I mean, I'm not sort of confident that they will even attempt to effectively do that. Meta, Facebook are responding to American political realities. And they don't much, a region such as Africa, where they're not really making a lot of money, really doesn't feature in their thinking around these sorts of issues. It's political and policy issues in the US that drives their thinking, and we've seen this in our experiences with these social media platforms. Where they're not really thinking about African audience, not really thinking about audiences where they're not generating a lot of money, a lot of revenues. So, it would be interesting to see how this impacts, how this new community notes initiative impacts, social media and Meta's social media platforms in the US. and then sort of see whether those sorts of effects could play out in other parts, especially here in Africa as well.
Federico, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Angie.
Thank you.